So, I was going to release another video tonight just to talk about the music, where we're taking it, but I thought, no, I'm going to take this video on a whole different angle. It's a taboo subject. It's a subject that you hear across the media. It is echoing through everywhere right now about it's okay not to be okay. And on that topic, I want to talk about my mental health. Before we get into it, a bit of a disclaimer, but I just want to say, the views and the opinions that I express in this video are merely just my own views and my own opinions based on the experiences that I've had with mental health and how I've dealt with it. And this video really, it's not to get the violins out, it's more to make people aware that we all go through these things. Do you know what I mean? We all go through these things. And if I can help one person reach out with this short video, then as far as I'm concerned, that's job done. So, let me take you back to March 2020 when the first COVID lockdown hit. To me, full of anxiety, it was uncertain times. I didn't know whether I was coming or going. I felt like I was sinking. I didn't really know what to believe, what not to believe. It was completely uncertain in my mind. And in my mind, I need to have things laid out in order. And with the future seeming so uncertain, it was starting to drive me a little wild. But that wasn't the pinnacle of my mental health. That was only the start. Now, to some, my mental health will seem very, very mild, and I'm aware of that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that have got a whole lot worse. But to me, when I started to change, was the time when I knew that I had to make a change. I was doubting myself on all aspects of life. I was doubting myself as a husband. I was doubting myself as a father, as a music artist. I was doubting myself about everything. To me, even though in my heart I knew I was doing the best possible job that I could do along all them aspects of life, but in my head it said different. My head was telling me that I needed to do better. My head was telling me that what I was doing wasn't good enough, and frankly I just couldn't deal with how my heart and my head was telling me two different things. This is where I took guidance from my wife and from my family around me that it was time to get some help. Now, in my earlier years, I was brought up with my mom as a single parent, and she always taught us that we should always speak our minds, wear our hearts on our sleeve, and never be ashamed to say how we feel. And I thank her for that, for teaching me them values, because that made it easier. That made the first barrier down for me when reaching out for support and for help, because I know there's a lot of people out there where it doesn't come naturally to reach out and say that you're struggling and you need help, and but they need to remember that it doesn't make you any less of a person for reaching out. In fact, it shows strength, and that's what I want to really get out there today, that reaching out to people shows an incredible amount of courage, and I know it's not easy for everyone. You know, just because I've experienced it this way doesn't mean that next person would experience it this way. But reaching out to people is the first barrier down. Now, at this time, when I reached out to people, I wasn't aware I was depressed. I just knew that something wasn't right. The way I was feeling between my head and my heart, and how I had an overall outlook of myself, wasn't good, and it wasn't the normal me. I'm known for going into a room and making friends with everyone. I'm known for talking to people, getting out there, loving small talk. The way I was feeling, it made me reserved. It made me not want, the thought of small talk made me feel physically sick. And the thought of going out to places that I weren't familiar with made me feel physically sick. Now, this ain't me. Since the age of 15, I've been going to parties and raves all over the UK, places I've never even been anywhere near. So to have these thoughts and feelings of dreading going places and dreading small talk from people that, maybe even people that I know, from having small talk with them, it dreaded me and made me feel physically sick. And at that point, I knew that something wasn't right, but I did not realise it was depression. So I took the advice of friends and family, and I self-referred to a counselling clinic and sat on their books for months on the waiting list, just waiting for a practitioner. Now, for me, feeling the way I did, in no way did I feel suicidal. I want to put that out there. In absolutely no way did I feel any of them thoughts. So this was slightly different to what other people may experience. My heart goes out to people who have them feelings and are sitting on waiting lists, waiting for practitioners to pick up their caseload. My heart genuinely goes out to people like that, because I was in a very fortunate position. Although, yes, inevitably I was depressed, although I didn't really realise it at the time. I was not having any negative thoughts like that would put me at risk while I was on the waiting list. So eventually, after months, I had a phone call from a practitioner who I gave a bit of a rundown of how I was feeling. Again, laid all the cards out on the table. And again, I know it's not that easy for some people, but at that time it was for me. So laid all the cards out on the table. He initially offered me cognitive behaviour therapy, so CBT. I've tried CBT in the past. For me, it added so much more stress and so much more pressure. I had to do I was expected to do assignments that needed to be in within a few days. So on top of how I was feeling, to have assignments thrown at me as well, it was a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, I didn't engage with that service of CBT. So I told the practitioner straight that CBT is not something I'd be looking for, because I've tried it in the past and it's failed. And for some people, it works an absolute treat. So I'm not dismissing cognitive behaviour therapy, but for me, that wasn't the type of counselling that I was looking for. So they assessed everything I was saying at that particular time. I then had to wait for another couple of weeks, and I was awarded through a phone call or a letter to say I was awarded 20 counselling sessions. Now, for me, this was totally new. I'd never had counselling, so the thought of it did terrify me, but I knew that I had to do something. Now, with me having no experience of actual counselling, I thought from the word go, the very first session, I'd be able to just blurt it all out there and see if he could answer or help me with how I was feeling. Now, we had to do an initial point scoring, which showed poor to very good, and I had to score myself on how I was feeling at that particular time. Little did I know that this point scoring would be done each week, so we could see if there was a natural progression of how I was feeling. A positive progression was obviously what we were aiming for. So after only slightly touching on how I was feeling as the session was progressing, it come to like the second and third week, and I carried on filling out the point sheet. This is where the word depression, which again, I was not aware that I was depressed. And if someone had said that I was depressed at the time, I wouldn't have believed it and I wouldn't have had it. So when I actually got speaking to the therapist, and as I started to make gradual progression, we had a look back on my score sheets. From the very first score sheet that obviously I filled in when we did the initial session, he told me that I was scoring very high for depression. That's when it shocked me. It blew me out of the water. Again, I refused to believe it, but hey ho, the scores are there. The proof's in the pudding. I was depressed. Now it was time to grab the bull by the horns and do something about it. So again, I can't stress this enough. I was totally clueless to what kind of questions or how the conversation would go. I didn't know if it would be awkward, it would be all one-sided, me talking, but he listened. And that was the main thing that I needed. He listened and he offered advice as and where he could. Now, what I received from this counselling was, the way he described it was, I had that many worries and little niggly stresses that were in almost a backpack. And the more stresses and worries I was putting in this backpack, the more it was weighing me down. So almost like you're falling backwards. So his job was to lay these worries out, although obviously not literally, but lay these worries out and work out which worries were which worries were out of my control. So if I was worrying over something that was completely out of my control and I couldn't change the scenario, and him doing that helped a lot. It helped a lot. Now, I'm not saying people could do this by themselves. They may need the right type of professional to bring out these worries, to lay them out in front of you, and to really look at which ones are worth worrying over and which worries are totally out of your control. And I know that cognitive behaviour therapy does cover a lot of that, but this was more intense. Now, this wasn't a quick thing. Now, this wasn't a quick turnaround by any means. I had 20 sessions and it was one a week. So as you can imagine, it was long and drawn out. There was weeks when I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't feel like answering the phone. I had very little motivation to even attack it head on. But one thing I can say is my wife was there supporting me from the start, and I can only thank her for doing that, because she's helped me be the best possible version of me that I could be today. Yeah. And yes, there was quite small tasks that I'd have to complete each week. Nothing too heavy, not by any means like the CBT with assignments. It wasn't like that, but there was short tasks that I'd have to reflect on. And what I would say is definitely do them things. Don't just cast them aside, because for a start, you do look like a bit of a tool when the counsellor asks you, okay, have you reflected on this? And you've got to make it up on the spot, let's face it. But definitely do the short activities that they ask you to do week by week, because they are designed to help you reflect and to help you absorb the information that you've been given. Because let's face it, within that 45 minutes of counselling each week, it's intense. There's a lot to take in, a hell of a lot to take in. So fast forwarding to not take too much of your time now. Session 19 or 20. My scores were looking pretty positive compared to when I first referred myself into the service. My counsellor was pleased with me. He told me that although they were going to sign me off the service, it's a door open policy, because I finished on such a positive that if ever I struggled in the future, I can always give them a call and go straight back into the session. Maybe not with the same counsellor, but straight back into the session. So it's not like we parted on bad terms. It's all positive. And for me, I was proud of myself for doing that. And as I say, if there's one person that sits and listens to me going on here, expecting it just to be a catch me here, catch me there, if there's one person that thinks that they might reach out for help just from hearing me tell you about my experiences, then as far as I'm concerned, doing this is totally worth it. But I just want to say, guys, just to kind of summarise, just to round it up, it's okay not to be okay. There is no shame in reaching out for help. You wouldn't believe, the minute you start talking to people, just how many people out there that are struggling with mental health. So many people that you see that put on a smile every day are struggling behind closed doors. And I think it's such a taboo subject, men's mental health is, and it doesn't get talked about enough. And as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be. It needs to be, because not every man is able to talk about their feelings so freely. Not every man can stand in front of a camera and tell social media how they've been feeling. And I appreciate that. I really do. I really do. So guys, if ever you're struggling, my inbox is always open for a start, but reach out to family, to friends, people you can generally trust. Reach out to them. So on that note, I am signing off. Again, this wasn't to get the violins out, to blow smoke up my arse or anything like that. This was just to say, this is how I was feeling. I wasn't aware at the time I was depressed. Now, in hindsight, of course I was, but I feel so proud of myself that I managed to get through that counselling. And yes, I do have stressful days. Yeah, it's not all gravy. I do get stressed still quite easily, but I see things in a different light now. I don't worry and mither about things that are out of my control, that I can't change even if I tried. And that is down to the support of my counsellor, the support of my wife, and me, myself as well, because obviously I play a major factor in getting the help, because you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. So guys, thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. And as always, big ups for the support.